meeting to order of the Environmental Justice Community Partnership Advisory Council. Today, September the 4th. It is 12:07. I'd like to welcome everyone here. Thank you all for braving the heat. Traffic wasn't that bad coming in. I came in from Exposition Park, so it wasn't that bad, but it is hot. It is very hot out there. Hi, how you doing? We've got a couple of events coming up that I'd really like to highlight. One is our Environmental Justice Conference coming up. Welcome. Coming up to our, coming up next week. Next week, Alicia. A week from tomorrow. September the 12th, and we'd like to invite all of you, if you haven't already registered, to please register. Our numbers are getting up there. We're really excited about it. It looks like we're going to have a full conference, so we're really excited about it. Lucille will talk more about it in her updates. But that and then the Clean Air Awards is coming up on October the 4th, I believe it is, the first Friday in October. It's, I believe, our 30th, 31st, is 31st one, so we're really excited about that. Again, we invite all of you to come. Welcome, Jill. We invite all of you to attend that and spread the word around about it to your respective communities. We'd appreciate that. With that having said, may I have an approval of the June 5th, 2019 meeting minutes?
Motion to approve.
Jessica, approval. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Question? No question. The minutes pass. The motion passes. Review of our follow-up action items. Number 1, South Coast AQMD staff follow-up with Odor on meeting with school board members regarding the CARE program. If you're not familiar, or if you don't remember, the CARE is the Clean Air Ranger education program that we launched this year, going into the elementary schools, doing school assemblies with second and third graders. It was very successful. We're continuing that program this year. I believe our first one is, I don't remember the date.
Our first assembly coming up is October.
Okay, it's in October. So the follow-up action was staff. We're going to present at a school in Huntington Beach, and then we'll have more information for you at our. We'll actually send you a calendar as we book these dates. Number 2, South Coast AQMD staff will provide a list of members on the interagency task force. We provided a list of current interagency task force members to you all. Did you all receive that?
It's at the entrance.
Okay, all right, make certain you get a copy of that before you leave. Demetria, if you can make certain everyone has a copy of that. Number 3, South Coast AQMD staff to follow up on child care options for AB 617 program. We've confirmed with legal that that is not an option. And if you guys have any questions, here's legal. No, Nancy could elaborate farther on that for you. I believe it's really an issue of liability. It basically comes down to that. We are and have discussed some options with partnering with neighborhood agencies, but I don't even know if that's an option for us. So at this point, it is not an option. Number 4, South Coast AQMD to follow up with Jessica Tovar on interpretation contractors. We're working together to put together a request for quotations, and that will be released to the board for approval at the October board meeting. We ask that if you know interpretation companies that you make them aware of the RFQ coming out, okay? We've used a couple companies that, you know, been okay, that we've liked in the past, but we certainly are open. And would appreciate it.
Does it have to be large companies, or could it be smaller businesses?
Both. I'm always in favor of supporting the smaller businesses if we can. If it works out, you know, if they're competitive, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then instead of giving you their contact, just let them know when the RFP is out. Is that the process?
Okay. If there's no questions on the follow-up actions, our discussion items 4 through 5. South Coast AQMD complaint reporting process. We have the pleasure of having Victor Yip with us. Victor is our Senior Enforcement Manager in Compliance and Enforcement. Victor also comes out to our meetings in the evening, our Community Steering Committee meetings, our environmental justice meetings, and has proved himself to be invaluable on many occasions. Victor, I again thank you for last week in South Coast. He's a member of the team. He really is. So Victor, we thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I spoke to you all about 6 months ago, giving an overview about our agency. So thank you for having me. And today I want to talk about our complaint reporting process and investigation process when we do receive complaints. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, and I'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. A little bit about myself. I am a Senior Enforcement Manager, one of the Senior Enforcement Managers for the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. I started here as an air quality inspector in 1999, so I've been here for about 21 years. My assignment as an air quality inspector was in the city of Vernon, so I'm very familiar with the EJ efforts and the areas that we're inspecting out there. Did that for about 9 years and moved my way up to supervising air quality inspector, then senior supervisor, and now eventually enforcement manager. So a little bit about our complaint reporting system. First thing is how air quality complaints are reported to South Coast AQMD. We have two methods of reporting a complaint from the public. So if you look here at the pictures, if you see a street sweeper kicking up dust, or far away in the distance, a smoke plume. Over here on the left, we're not quite sure if that's steam or smoke, but the public, they see these kind of issues and they want to report it to us. And so they can by either using our telephone reporting system, which is, I'm sure you've heard, the 1-800-CUT-SMOG phone number, which is 1-800-288-7664. South Coast AQMD, we accept air quality complaints 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. During business hours, Tuesday to Friday, we have an attendant to answer your phone call, to ask some preliminary questions, and the radio operator will then enter the complaint into a system for dispatch to an inspector. During off hours and the weekend hours, your complaint would be received by a voice message system, and we have a standby supervisor who reviews these messages and determines whether an immediate dispatch is needed or not based on the report. So there's two systems that we're constantly operating, and it's good to know a little bit about each one. Complaints can be made anonymously. We keep all complainant information, complainant locations confidential. We don't release that in any way. But in these cases, when a complaint is filed anonymously, it limits the inspector's ability to get more information about that complaint, date, time, just some of the details that would be helpful for their investigation. But we would still investigate anonymous complaints based on the description provided by the complainant. And again, the last bullet is that all complainant information is kept confidential, so there should be no fear to give us a call, whether you provide your name and number or not. Just know that we hold that information to us. The other form of reporting complaints is through our website at www.aqmd.gov. At the top of the banner, there's a button for complaints, and you can enter your complaint through a web app by entering your phone number, email address. Again, you can remain anonymous by putting anonymous under the name, but know that an email is required to be able to file a complaint through our web system. And when a complaint is filed through the web system, it gets automatically logged into our system for, again, dispatch to an inspector during business hours. So some of the types of complaints that we receive a lot of asbestos complaints, dust complaints, complaints at gasoline dispensing facilities. The majority of our complaints received are for odors. We do receive complaints for open burning, overspray, residential wood burning, smoke, and really any other types of complaints we can think of. I've seen complaints for things like bee spots on your car, or chemtrails, or just anything that somebody feels that they're being affected by in the air where they live or where they work. So here's some trends that for the last, since 2000, of the number of complaints that we received. So I'm going to try to do my laser pointer here. So if you can see here, in 2018, we received a little over 10,000 complaints. 2017 and 2016, 2015 were our highest years. We received a little over 11,000 complaints. In 2017, we reached almost 12,000 complaints total for the district. And if you can kind of see some of the trends here, the lower dips in 2008, 2009, 2010, we think it might be attributed to the economic downturn. Manufacturing was down, and just the economy was not doing as well. So we saw that response in the number of complaints that we received during those years. We feel that in maybe 2015, 16, and 17, the elevation of complaints were due to possibly the Aliso Canyon incident, Porter Ranch, and some of the issues that we had in Paramount. 2018 seemed relatively quiet, but we still reached 10,000 complaints, which is pretty high. And we feel that the South Coast AQMD's outreach to the public about different ways to call in, different ways to report your complaints have been really effective. So we're seeing that number being maintained. I ran some numbers for 2019, and we are currently at 6,617 complaints. So it seems like we are on track to reach another 10,000 this year. In comparison to last year at the same time through August, last year we had 6,029 complaints. So we were a little bit higher than last year. And again, through outreach and public participation, we really appreciate bringing those issues to our attention so that we can investigate it and see if we can help mitigate it for you. So as you can see here in the blue band, this represents the number of odor complaints. So again, the majority of our complaints received are for odors, and last year we received about 6,000 complaints out of the 10,000. So about 60% are for odor-related issues, and I'm going to get into our odor investigations in a little bit. So a simple flow of the complaint investigation process. A complaint is reported to South Coast AQMD, either through the web or through the phone. That complaint is logged into our system and assigned to either a team and to an inspector. The complaint is dispatched to the inspector via email. Sometimes if a supervisor sees the complaint prior to the email going out, they may call the inspector and say, hey, this complaint's on its way. I need you to start making your way out there based on the severity of the complaint. And then the inspector conducts the investigation. And that process entails once the inspector receives the email assignment, if the contact information is provided, the inspector will call the complainant to obtain additional information. Things like, what are you experiencing? Is there a specific time of day that this is happening? If it's happening only in the afternoons on a Tuesday, then we might not have to go out there right away. If, let's say, it's a Wednesday or a Thursday, we might be able to coordinate kind of a focused response to that complaint. And I think that'll help a little bit better to identify the problem out there.
Victor, one complaint will trigger, I thought I had heard that there had to be 3 complaints.
There's a little bit of a difference there, and I know I've been getting several questions about that. That's a good question. So during business hours, a single complaint will be dispatched to an inspector. During our off hours, our internal practice is that we would receive 3 complaints alleging the same source within an hour before dispatching an inspector. So not every single complaint gets dispatched during off hours. Those may be held over to the next business day. And again, it's based on the description and the volume of calls we get in a short period of time. There's other situations during the off hours. If it's an ongoing issue that we know about, that let's say an ongoing odor issue that happens only at night, then we may put that on an alert list to our supervisor saying, if we get a single call for this complaint after hours, please dispatch an inspector. So there are cases like that that we would dispatch on a single complaint. So once we give you a call back and obtain the information, the inspector will conduct the investigation. If it's, let's say, an odor complaint, they'll drive to the complainant's location and see if they can detect the odor. If the complainant provides an alleged source, we'll then go to the source and conduct an inspection, notify the operator, and see if there's any operation upsets or anything like that. If it's a dust complaint or something like that, we might just go straight to the source and see if there's any fugitive dust violations going on. So it really kind of depends on the type of complaint that would initiate the type of response from our inspector. And once the inspector completes their investigation, they should be calling you back to discuss the results. We hear from the public that sometimes that call's not made. So internally, we're addressing that with our inspectors to make sure that they do notify the complainant at the end of the investigation. We do appreciate dialogue with the complainant. If the complainant says, don't worry about calling me back, I just want to make you aware of it, then, we'll honor that and break from our normal procedures. So we do appreciate that kind of feedback from the public. Any questions on the process? Sir.
How are you marketing the phone number for people to dial in?
The outreach efforts, I know Fabian, can you help me out on this one, on getting the number out? We are advertising on social media?
Social media, we do it through social media, through every meeting that we go to, every presentation that we're at, that's presented at the end of the presentation. Not well enough if you have to ask, obviously, no, really. And Alicia?
We also, any event that staff go to, that are invited to, like on the weekends, you'll see us out. Most of our materials that we give out to the community, whether it be a pencil, a wristband bracelet, they all have the number on there. So most of our giveaways, is trademarked with the number so that you can easily refer to that.
It's on all of our letterhead. We have been asked to do billboards, and that's something that we need to look into. It's quite an expense, but we have been asked to do that in both English and Spanish. But every opportunity that we can, we put it out there. Mm-hmm.
I know that for us, we post it every once in a while on our Facebook pages.
Oh, thank you.
So that the public is aware as well. Just because I know that, there's so much that the AQMD can do, but all of us, I think we're in our communities already, and so people follow us and we can share that information.
And we'd appreciate for the rest of you to do the like, because that's how it spreads. And explain, we have collaterals in both English and Spanish that explain it, that we pass out. We have a geographical team that has different grid areas. And every event that they go to, they're passing out those collaterals.
6117.
And the 8617 team. Thank you, team. This is part of our 8617 team here, who are out in the neighborhood. You're all familiar with 8617. This is the LCAM team. We have Ryan, Daniel, and Banji here who man our team. They do our outreach. In fact, they were given a meeting one day, and within 2 weeks, outreach for the meeting had over 50 people at the meeting, and it was quite successful. So again, thank you. Hi, Denny. Denny is part of our event team. Denny makes it happen. Denny, I've already pressed your Clean Air Awards, but Denny makes that happen. So please see him for any other questions that you might have. Sorry for interrupting your presentation.
Thank you for the help.
Another question?
Yes.
I have a few questions about the process.
Sure.
I imagine, you said that there are times when it's a known issue. So do you still go out and investigate, or do you just say to the person on the phone, or does the investigator just follow up with the person on the phone and say, this is likely the cause?
Oh, no, we do follow up because we will go out to investigate even known issues because a company in if they're violating our rule, that violation is a per day type of violation. So any day we go out there and we notice the problem and we verify a violation, then we would take enforcement action. So we would be going out.
Okay.
For all those.
And well, I think 2 more questions.
Sure.
How quickly does it, so the person calls and like a few minutes later the inspector returns the call, or how does that work?
It really, it's dependent on a couple factors. So for my team, my group is situated in geographic sectors. So we try to keep them in a smaller area where they can respond to complaints fairly quickly. If they're clear across town, it may take them a little while to drive there, and they should be talking to the complainants about that. You know, you're in West LA, I'm way over here in, you know, Burbank or something.
Right.
So it might take me an hour or 2 to get out there. I'm not, depending on traffic. The call should be happening fairly quickly. We try to respond within a couple of hours with a phone call. And from there, again, it depends on if they are farther away from the location, still within their geographic area. If they're in the middle of an inspection, they might need some time to wrap up that inspection unless it's something that we instruct them to go ahead and break from that inspection to go to the site.
Okay, and my last question is, I guess I'm just not entirely clear on the purview, or like what complaints are legitimate, if that's the word, or not, or what sorts of things are in your purview or not, and does that come up in conversation? Do you sometimes tell people, sorry, but we don't address that kind of thing?
Yes, there are a lot of complaints that we receive don't fall under our jurisdiction. So for example, let's say somebody's operating a business at their home. There's some fuzzy lines on whether we can enforce a private resident that's operating a business. So in those cases, we would refer those complaints to either building and safety, code enforcement, you know, kind of a lead agency that deals with those kind of things. And so when we do receive these types of complaints, we will let the complainant know that, you know, we don't have a rule or we don't have authority to address
Okay.
this, but we'll get you to the right agency that we
Got it.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
But Victor, just since we're on that topic, a little bit of overlap. What if somebody's operating a paint, or somebody's painting their vehicle, and it is a home-based business,
Mhm.
you know, albeit not an official business maybe, but is that under your purview?
That's a little fuzzy. Yeah, so I mean, I can see how the coatings that they're using might be under our jurisdiction, but the entry to their private residence may be restricting us from taking action. So in those cases, we would rely on, again, code enforcement to address the illegal business. And if we can mitigate the illegal business, then that should secondarily address the error issue.
So that doesn't mean that you can only regulate businesses that pull permits from AQMD?
Right.
Is that exactly what it means?
Well, no, we do regulate businesses that don't have
That don't,
permits.
okay.
Yeah, but if they are a business entity and they have some kind of air emission that we regulate, then we have authority under the Health and Safety Code to enter and do the investigation.
Thank you.
So now I wanted to talk a little, show some examples of some complaints. These are videos either submitted by the public or taken by our own inspectors. So this is a typical complaint of fugitive dust. Let me try
And what is fugitive dust?
Fugitive dust is defined as dust that is visible and crosses the property line of a business. So as you can see, the winds were blowing. This company wasn't addressing this pile with sufficient water, so the wind would carry the dust across this property line and into their neighbors. So when our inspector arrived and reviewed this footage, we confirmed that yes, a fugitive dust violation occurred, and we took the action against the company. They immediately mitigated it by wetting it down and actually removing the pile to more of a central location in their plan. So, another example, this one is for visible emissions or smoke. We get a lot of these, and hopefully my video plays. So this was taken by our inspector. He drove up and saw this. This is clearly a Ringelmann 4, 100% opacity smoke violation. Our inspectors are trained to read smoke and determine the opacity coming right off of the stack at the point. And if this violation occurs for more than 3 minutes in an hour, then it's a violation of our Rule 401, our visible emissions rule. Just some extra information about this complaint. The complainants were complaining about the smoke getting on their skin, their eyes, and things like that. And the sad part was when we arrived, that company is a crematory, so they were cremating the remains of a dead body at that time. So we took the action, and it turns out that they needed to adjust some of their business practices with the crematory unit. They weren't waiting for the temperature to reach a certain point, and so we addressed that with them to make sure that they changed their process. So going back to the most complaints we get are odor complaints. A lot of the questions from the public are how do we regulate odors? And odors are enforced through our Rule 402, which is our nuisance rule. And it states that a person shall not discharge from any source whatsoever such quantities of air contaminants or other materials which cause injury, detriment, nuisance, or annoyance to any considerable number of persons or to the public, or which endanger the comfort, repose, health, and safety of any such persons or the public, or which cause or have a natural tendency to cause injury or damage to business or property. So the key with this rule is the considerable number of persons. And a lot of questions come up on what does that mean? And so that really comes down to a kind of case-by-case basis. So 2 examples I want to give is, let's say a factory is putting out some pretty foul odors, and the community downwind consists of 3 houses, and 1 house complains. And so we would look at it and say, well, 1 house out of 3 total is considerable. So on that 1 complaint, we may cite the company for violating nuisance. On the other hand, if the neighborhood is a large residential area, let's say with 100 houses, we may not be able to determine that the considerable number of persons were affected off of just 1 household complaint. We might need a little bit more, maybe 6, maybe 10, something to be able to prove that this emission caused discomfort to a considerable number of people. So it needs to be evaluated by the inspector and supervisory staff along with legal to make that determination. And so we do look at that kind of pretty closely. One thing to understand is that with nuisances, when if the complaint comes in also in a place of public, so that might take us away from the considerable number. We might still need a few, but if we determine that somebody's affecting a place of public, we may cite off of less than 10 complaints. Another example is, let's say an administrator of a school calls on behalf of all the children at the school. We don't expect that the children call us directly. We would like the adults to call, or people that are responsible for those children, either the teacher, the administrator, to represent them. So off of 1 complaint from a school administrator, we will consider that violation to be a nuisance, being that we verified there were multiple kids, 50 kids on campus at the time and things like that. So all of these cases do get looked at in that way, so I hope that kind of helps give some clarity on how we enforce this nuisance rule. I do want to get into a little bit about some of the challenges in confirming a nuisance. Our rule, our policies require that we confirm the odor, the emission with the complainants at the time. So when we think about a considerable number of people, a lot of things need to happen at the same time. So we do need to receive all those complaints from the multiple people in the area. Our inspector does need to get to the area while the emission's happening and verify that emission with the complainants in their presence. And so right off the bat, it feels like it's a pretty big challenge. But our inspectors are really well trained to handle these types of investigations, and so we've been successful in enforcing nuisance quite a bit this year. Once the inspector arrives at the location of the complainants, the inspector will interview all the complainants, determine the intensity of the odor, the presence of the odor. They'll track the wind to see where it's coming from, and what they'll do is they'll follow the wind upwind to its source. Now, if you see here, industrial areas are usually populated with multiple facilities. So through a process of elimination, our inspector needs to identify the specific company that's putting out this emission. And what they'll do is, if they smell it here, they'll need to go upwind. And if they don't smell it here, then, and they don't maybe smell it around here, they can make that determination that it's from this facility. But if they smell it here and they smell it here, well, then we need to go upwind further and then decide if it's solely this company or maybe both companies that are contributing to this emission. And that's done through the inspection process. We'll visit both sites and see if there's any processes that's contributing to that emission. So with the characteristic of odors, I mean, they're very fleeting. You can smell it one minute and 2 minutes later it's gone. And by the time our inspector calls or arrives, that emission's gone, and we really wish they would have been there sooner. But that's kind of just the nature of the odors, nature of the type of emissions that we're dealing with. And it's just kind of an ongoing challenge for us that we tackle on. So this was kind of an example of a simple odor investigation. Everything's on land. We have access to the upwind location of each factory. We have easy access to the complainants. But I want to talk about a more complex complaint investigation and how our agency is starting to use technology to help us in this investigation. So I'm not sure if a lot of you have heard about this kind of mysterious odor along the coastline affecting Long Beach, Seal Beach, Huntington Beach. Since January of 2016, we've received over 2,000 complaints, describing a petroleum, sulfur, chemical type odor. And so if you can see the geography here, if we get a complaint in Seal Beach and our inspector first is able to determine the odor, if we're getting onshore winds and they get to the beach and they're still smelling it, we don't have much access to get onto the water to determine that source. So our traditional upwind, downwind evaluation isn't as easily made here. One thing about these types of complaints is that they're very fleeting. So in a matter of minutes, they're gone. And when we do track the complaints, we notice, let's say, based on time, we would receive some in Seal Beach, and then as time went on, the complaints would start edging towards the inland. And usually they stop around the 405 freeway, but that's why we kind of circled this area here. We still haven't determined the exact source, but we do have information that leads us to believe what the source or what sources are contributing to these issues. So the first thing we did was we wanted to take a look at all the offshore sources. Based on the wind patterns, we're thinking the winds from offshore to onshore are carrying these odors to the complainants. So we started using our FLIR camera. Using the optical gas filter, we can detect organic vapors that's characteristic of these petroleum type of odors. We did a survey along the shoreline to all the oil fields, and we didn't really find too many issues that would contribute to large volumes of complaints. There was one weekend we received 400 complaints over a 3-day period about these odors, and so we're thinking now this must be something more a lot larger scale. And so that brought our attention to the offshore platforms, and so we did surveillances and investigations at those facilities. Again, didn't really find too much going on over there. So one day in August 2017, we had a team of inspectors on a water taxi doing surveillance at the oil platforms, and they saw one of these oil tankers just there, and they said, they decided they wanted to point the FLIR camera and see maybe they might get something. So what they saw, I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. How do I play this? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see. I gotta turn off my laser pointer. So here, without the filter, you see it's just a kind of a clear day. And so when you flip on the optical gas filter, you can see a plume here. And then I think they switched over to thermal as well. You'll see that coming on soon. So now they switched the lens to thermal, so you can kind of see the heat. And from here, it's hard to see, but you can see there's some of the vapors kind of moving along this way, right? So our inspectors who are trained to use the camera are trained to read the data from the camera, and they determined that this plume that we're seeing is not steam. It's actually organic vapor, VOCs, that's being released by this vessel. So that kind of focused our attention towards the ships, the oil-containing vessels out there. Here's another vantage point. So as you can see, when it comes to a steam plume, it may carry, but then it quickly disappears. It goes from 100% to nothing. This plume is trailing out, and so it's some kind of material that is being carried out. And so with that, we wanted to use more technology to try to identify these as a potential source. So we started using sampling equipment. We started using online tools, mapping. There's a database called Marine Traffic that tracks all the oil vessels in the area and it tracks their route. And so we used all of these tools that we had to help us track these ships while we're tracking the complaints to see if we can identify the source. In terms of sampling equipment, we used the Tedlar bag and a Suma canister. These are very easy to use grab samples. So when our inspector would go out there, if they detected the odor, they can open up one of these containers or flip open the Suma canister, grab the sample, and send it to the lab. With this effort, because the odors were so fleeting, it was hard for our inspectors to get out there in time to pull a sample. So what we did was we did outfit a lot of the local first responders, the fire departments that are situated along that coastline with sample equipment. So if they detected an odor, they can pull a sample, notify us, and we would pick it up and analyze it. Out of 37 samples, 36 contain a petroleum signature. So that kind of narrowed down our scope to know a little bit more about what we're dealing with. And we're dealing with something with a kind of a petroleum signature in it, maybe crude oil or something like that. One came out with a biological signature. We're thinking maybe there was some emissions from the wetlands down there near Huntington Beach during that time. And we looked at the tides and things like that, and we pulled that sample, and it did correspond pretty well. Mapping, we're trying to use some back trajectory mapping. Yes, ma'am.
What's the end of the story?
Huh?
What's
The end of the story is we are still investigating. We're still trying to get access to the water. We're working with local law enforcement to get on their taxis, their water ships, to get out to do surveillance around these boats. We are tracking that along with the times we're getting complaints to see if there's a correlation with the winds, with meteorology, just to try to get as much information as we can to make that determination.
So is it more than one boat that you were wondering about?
There are repeat boats that we notice are nearby when we are getting complaints, so we are focused on them. We have a list, but there's 15 different boats at a time out there, so we are using our tracking system to identify them.
Do you approach them or you wait? You don't approach them at this point?
We do if we detect an emission using the FLIR camera. We'll track them and wait till they go to berth. Once they go to berth, then we have the authority to board the ship and conduct an inspection against our Rule 1142, which is marine vessel operations. And we'll take instrumentation to take readings of their pressure relief valves and things like that to see what might be causing these emissions.
Hi, I'm Jill Lynn, I work at AQMD as well. You might also mention we have been able to issue some notices of violations
Yes.
to some ships.
Okay.
So it's been a lot of work, and they still have a lot more to do, but there have been some violations, and the folks talk to each other. So sometimes all you need to do is give, a few tickets, and then the word gets out, and people say, oh, AQMD's looking, so we need to kind of clean up the problems. So
Right.
a couple of tickets for all this work doesn't sound as much, but it really is a deterrent for those ships and then others in the same industry.
Right.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. So yes, as Jill mentioned, we did issue some citations to some ships for defective pressure relief valves. And we're hoping that effort would kind of indirectly mitigate the complaints that we're receiving of the odors. Again, it's not a traditional nuisance violation, upwind, downwind determination. We're tackling this issue in an alternative way using technology and other means. And so the last thing I want to mention is just this marine traffic.
Good job, Victor, that's a tough one.
Oh, thank you.
I followed that in the register, in the OC register, and I was following it, so yeah.
Oh, okay.
With everything you just described and then having to do all that crosswork,
Right.
that's kudos to you guys.
Thank you, appreciate that. We are working with all the other divisions and just collaborating on this with meteorology, modeling, and again, using this marine traffic, we can see, like, let's say this boat, we can see that it's out here in Anchorage and track when it gets into berth, and when it leaves the area and things like that. So we're doing that for the ships in the area. And we're not quite at the high season for those types of complaints. That's coming in September and October. So we're waiting to see how our efforts with boarding the ships results in this fall. And with that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Any other questions for Victor?
I'd just like to add one thing about keeping the complainant's identity confidential. I just want to assure all of you that even if somebody calls in to complain and gives their information, all their identifying information, name, address, phone number, we do not release that. It's only in the event there's actual litigation, then it may become an issue. But if somebody submits a Public Records Act request, or if the facility who's cited with a nuisance says, I want to know who complained, we will withhold all identifying information. So we black it out of the inspector's reports, we redact it wherever it appears. We will not identify who complained. So nobody should really be reluctant when they're registering a complaint with us to provide their identifying information. We do keep it confidential.
Great information.
Thank you.
Nancy. Victor, what happens if someone wants to file a complaint in another language and they don't speak English?
Oh, we do have a Spanish hotline, first of all, and we do have a list of certified translators for various languages that we can put that person in touch with them. We may need to find them and maybe call them back, but we do have certified translators.
Great, thank you. Jessica?
Around how many inspectors are there, if you know? And then what kind of training is needed? Is there any training programs to give community members that are in environmental justice areas the ability to reach these type of inspector jobs? Because I think those would be the best.
Oh. Well, currently we have close to a little less than 100 supervisors and inspectors. So that brings us to about a little over 80 inspectors to cover the entire basin. We have 4 specialized teams, so not all of them handle the same types of complaints that the other teams do. So my group, I have 32 inspectors, and they're sectorized through the whole basin to cover the industrial type of complaints, your odors, dust, and things like that. We have a toxics team that handles asbestos and other toxics-related types of complaints. And then we have a refinery and energy team that deals with the refinery complaints. In terms of jobs, we are in the middle of a recruitment right now for new inspectors. The outreach, I think we do post our jobs on our website through social media. I think Facebook, I've seen some job postings. Career fairs, you'll see us at career fairs, at college campuses. In terms of the EJ areas, we could do some outreach through our community meetings and maybe try to set up some kind of bulletin to inform those communities of job opportunities.
But they would already have to have any training needed.
Training for inspectors, there's no requirement for training to be able to be offered the job. Once we bring in a new class of inspectors, they do go through some formal inspector training. So we train them on complaint investigations, the different rules, and gaining entry, and all the inspector type of work. So they go through about 10 weeks of training with us before we have them fully immersed in their teams.
What about education
That's what I
requirements?
said.
Education requirement is, a degree is not required for the inspector one position. It's a desirable qualification, but you need, I think it's like 34 semester or quarter semester units of science classes. So they need to be in a program that's science-based, natural science, chemistry, biology, and things like that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question, Jessica. Are there any other,
Hi, Julie Jordan, Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I was just wondering, you mentioned that, or you didn't mention, but I saw on the screen that agricultural operations don't fall under the nuisance rule.
Right.
What happens when you get a call or complaint that's coming from an agricultural facility?
We would notify them that a complaint was received. The agricultural operations they know pretty well that they're exempt from nuisance, but we try to tap into their good neighbor practice to just try to help encourage them to mitigate it on their own. In terms of something like a composting facility, those facilities are under the agricultural exemption, but there's a mechanism in the Health and Safety Code to make a referral to the LEA for those composting facilities. And so CalRecycle and the local LEAs can respond to odor complaints for those facilities and do an inspection against their best management practices and their plan to mitigate odors. So we don't have direct enforcement, but there are other avenues we can take.
And what about processing facilities, like maybe not a farm or a direct growing operation, but a processing facility, sort of the next step?
I'm not fully clear on what falls under the agricultural operation. I know there's some processing that is defined under the agricultural operation. So we would have to look at what specific process they're doing and see if it's actually defined as an ag operation or not. And if it's not, then we have authority to enforce.
We will have jurisdiction over places like green waste facilities.
Right.
We will regulate those. And now, of course, there's a lot of questions about cannabis and
Yes.
at what point do we regulate?
What's an LEA?
It's a lead enforcement agency. So for LA County, the LEA would be Department of Public Health.
I see.
Around the same lines, Sahara from Alianza Coachella Valley. I'm interested to know, I think that this process for this specific urban community, I'm wondering how this would be in relation to rural needs, because we do have agriculture, and in particular in the Coachella Valley, we also have the Salton Sea.
Oh, right.
So the Salton Sea, we already know that it produces an odor. We already know that it belongs to multiple people, to the state, to federal government, private entities. What are some of the, I see opportunities with this process, but I'm wondering, what does AQMD need? Because AQMD already knows that that's happening. I know that there is a release and notification when the odors are really bad, specifically during the summer.
Right.
We're starting to see economic burdens on family members where the smell is kind of permanent. It stays in their filters, on their ACs and their filters in their homes. In regards to an urgency like that, does it take the same process where people still need to report and call, or what are some of the other processes available?
I'm trying to think, with Salton Sea, I think because it's almost a natural occurring incident. I'm not sure how much. Nancy, do you have
Yeah,
to know?
the prohibition against causing a nuisance goes against a person. So any person who causes or allows an odor. So that sort of rules out a causation that comes from something like the Salton Sea, because no person, there's no one facility owner, there's no operator that is causing the odor. It's naturally occurring because of a horrific combination, a perfect storm of bad things that happened at Salton Sea. So we couldn't cite anybody for nuisance for the odors there.
We can cite the state. They're responsible for that
Yeah, but
body of water.
they're not, it's not an operation or a process or, usually it's a manufacturing facility or it's a landfill that's owned and operated by. They have a gas collection system that may be inadequate. You can identify the cause of the odor and it's not naturally occurring because of a combination of compounds at that site. Nobody's doing anything to make that happen at this point. It was all done by just creating the Salton Sea like we did. So there's no jurisdiction for us.
There was a case similar, remember like 15 years ago with Lake Elsinore? The fish were dying because algae was being trapped on the surface of the lake. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I thought the feds made the city, if the city owns the lake, they made them clean up the algae, remove the dead fish. So somebody's got jurisdiction over somebody. And
Yeah,
it's-
there are other
Right.
laws that need to be applied.
But
It's
not
not like
here.
nobody's accountable.
Right.
But you can't use public nuisance, the odor itself, as a means for us to have jurisdiction over it.
You gotta call that one.
Yes, Joe, please.
So I just wanted to add that we have other people at South Coast AQMD that are very involved in some of the task force and the committees and the other technical groups with Salt Sea. And as you mentioned, we have monitors out there. So we are able to monitor the levels, and when they get unhealthy, we notify people so at least they can stay indoors if they have that opportunity or things like that. But we are also providing technical expertise for some of the groups that are looking for long-term solutions for what we can do to Salt Sea.
So then, for example, this number won't be appropriate for them to use if they smell the odor from the Salton Sea?
They can
Or
still
who
They
they
can
call?
still call, yeah, we don't want to discourage anybody from
We
calling.
did have one horrific event a couple of years ago,
Yes, yeah.
which resulted in literally thousands of complaints coming in because of the odor from Salton Sea. But other than apprise people of what was going on, monitor the air to see what was contained in those emissions, there wasn't anything illegal.
Oh, and so when the numbers you had, the 10,000, 12, the number of calls per year, does that include all the calls, even the ones that are not in your purview, or does that exclude those?
That's every call or web complaint that comes in.
Okay.
Yeah, we log every single
Okay.
complaint call.
And you do have to remember that there are often problem facilities at every given year, we seem to have one, which will generate hundreds, if not upwards of 1,000 calls per year.
Right.
Things like Sunshine Canyon landfill, for years, we've just got hundreds and hundreds of calls. The problem at Aliso Canyon
Yeah.
generated probably thousands of
Yeah.
complaints during that period of time.
Sure.
I just wanna say that, this is the best presentation I've ever sat
Oh,
on
thank you.
at the AQMD. I'm very excited to understand more in depth, what happens after, we get a complaint. So very thankful for it and really hoping to hear others, other presentations like this. It was
Sure, great. Thank you, Victor. Any other
Appreciate that.
questions or comments? All right.
Okay, great. Thank you
Victor.
all.
Really appreciate you. Mhm. All right, our next presentation is it's an EJC update by Alicia Rodriguez. We all know Alicia. She's gonna provide updates on the Environmental Justice Conference, Clean Air Ranger Program, and the Interagency Task Force, which Victor kind of touched on a bit about the purpose of why we're doing this Interagency Task Force. So Alicia, it's yours.
So thank you everyone for being here today. I want to start off by just saying that your input really guides these programs and really gives staff input on what you want to see in the community. So please at any point, if you have any suggestions or input, please let me know. We always take that into consideration, and at times we follow up as well to have more in-depth conversations and really see how to move these programs forward. So part of the Environmental Justice Community Partnership, we host an annual Environmental Justice Conference, and that is on September 12th. There will be an 8 a.m. networking component this year, and the conference program begins at 9. So also just attendees will receive a conference summary at the end with rising themes and next steps on collaboration, since our theme this year is building alliances and progressive solutions. Also, we have confirmed our keynote speaker. That will be City of LA Councilwoman Nuri Martinez. And keynote speaker will be Victor Pacheco. He's a community organizer with Community Coalition in South LA. And he will serve as the Master of Ceremonies. In addition to confirming the keynote and Master of Ceremonies, we also finalized the program. So for the plenary session, we will explore community-focused strategies such as AB 617. And for our breakout sessions, we have 4. The first one being Pathways to Community Science. Panelists will introduce attendees to community science and talk about, different technology that's arising, how the community can be more involved and analyze data and so forth. Breakout session B is Tapping the Power of Youth. Panelists will discuss impacts of the youth environmental justice movement, how young people bring fresh perspectives, optimism, and enthusiasm to the table. Breakout C is a screening of the documentary Estamos Aquí, a community documentary about communities around the Salton Sea, as Sahara was pointing out earlier, and I really recommend that one. We're really excited for it. There'll be a short Q&A after. I wish the breakout sessions could be a little bit longer to really talk to the filmmakers, but Sahara will be moderating that panel with the 2 filmmakers, so that'll be really exciting to learn more about that documentary and the youth as well involved. Breakout session D, is Community Voices and Collaboration, and a few of the panelists in these 2 breakout sessions will be different. The other breakout sessions will be the same, but give attendees an opportunity to attend both. But for these breakout sessions, we had members really apply to give a presentation to the different breakout sessions on different initiatives or programs that they're involved in within the community. So they'll have the opportunity to share some insights, lessons learned on some of the programs that they're currently involved with. And also, it can either spark dialogue, conversation, opportunities to work together on different projects. So currently we have 415. It's changed slightly from when we made this presentation. RSVPs, our registration goal is at 425, so we expect to hit our mark in terms of registration. But if you do know anyone that's interested in attending, please feel free to share the information with them. We're still sending out email blasts If you would like content that we've already pre-written, let us know and we'll send that out to you. We also are excited to announce we have a bus coming in from Pacoima Beautiful with residents. So hopefully moving forward, we can continue that momentum and bring in as much community as possible. Any questions on the EJ conference before I move on to the next item? Okay. So next is just a brief,
You know, I have
yes.
a semi-silly, or maybe not so silly question, but, so there are all these youth in Orange County that, you know, are actively thinking about the environment and throughout, and this would be something really cool for them, but it's during their school time, and it would be great to figure out if there's any way that, that they could attend anyway and get, you know, some sort of pass or certificate. I don't know how school works anymore.
What we're looking into, what we want to look into is the teachers getting credit in environmental science or whatever they find applicable for that, to do that for next year, because that is a concern. We've done it on a Saturday and
Weekends,
had
yeah.
complaints about Saturdays, you know, having it on a Saturday,
Yes.
so it just seems to work better on a weekday, but we certainly want to have these kids involved, not just receiving the information, but the experience of going to a conference, the exposure of doing that kind of a thing, and receiving information in that format, you know, so.
And their own input too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we were actually working with a school in Long Beach that has an environmental focus. And for one reason or another, it didn't end up working out this year, but it is possible and, you know, may still be possible for this conference. I mean, we can talk after.
I'd love to.
Okay, so, and also moving forward for next year, you know, that opportunity's there and we're willing to coordinate with schools. Of course, we need to keep track of numbers and all of that, so we make sure we have enough seats and room for other community members, but that's definitely doable. So next is the Clean Air Ranger Education Program. As Fabian was mentioning earlier, we will be doing a presentation on October 3rd at 20th Street Elementary School in Los Angeles, and another one on November 15th that one of our advisory council members from here helped us coordinate. She's not here today, Susanna, but she's from San Bernardino, and we have now a lot of schools that are asking us, and we were going back and forth on whether or not we want to start a wait list or how we want to do that. So there's a lot of interest and a lot of need. So also we are coordinating finally in Huntington Beach, Oscar. We were not going to go to Oakview Elementary School. They recommended that we go to another school in the district, so we're coordinating that.
Okay.
So for me, it's best when I use the advisory council as much as possible to really link them to the communities most in need. Next is just a brief update on the Environmental Justice Interagency Task Force. So the task force was created to identify and implement mechanisms that government agencies can put in place to better coordinate with each other on environmental complaints and environmental justice issues. So one of our task force members is Victor Yip and some of his staff that regularly attend the meetings that help give insight into the complaint process and what they're seeing on the ground. Our 4 goals that have come out this year is to adopt new language for the term complaint, and we're still exploring that more in the task force, but we've had community members say that complaint really deters them from filing or issuing a report. So we're trying to use, you know, perhaps look at using different language when we're talking about the subject to the community, such as report. Next, we have implement an environmental agency staff training with what we would call frontline staff that answer the phone, and also inspectors that are out in the ground. A lot of agencies have stated that there's a need for this training for the past 2 years from the summits that we've been at. And so we're really exploring that further. And right now we have a goal of January set to create this training. It's in the works. This morning we had a meeting with Lisa. I have a call tomorrow with Kevin Olt from California EPA that's also on the task force on different contracts that he has. So we're working to see how we can best implement that. We also have another goal to expand and distribute an interagency referral directory. Right here it says to create a handbook, but this is always changing as we go and seeing what is the best outcome that can come from it. So since then, it's been changed to a directory because what we found is that a handbook would need to be updated constantly. Cali PA has already distributed a handbook for EJ communities, so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but more or less come out with a document that the community can easily access and know who to call. So we're thinking of more of a directory type of document, but we're still, researching how to best compile that. It's a lot of information that goes on there. We want to make it in a way where the community, anyone who picks up the document will be able to read it. So we're currently working on that. And then lastly, we had a meeting with Victor Yip and his staff, and they said that they were really excited that they had gone on joint inspections since they attended the interagency task force meeting, because they were able to meet other agencies and contacts on their compliance and enforcement teams. So one of the projects that grew from that meeting was to create an internal document for agencies to be able to tackle inspections together and get to different root causes. So we're working on that document as well. The next meeting is on September 25th from 12 to 2 at the California Community Foundation, and following that is on December 11th. And also,
What city is it?
they're all in Los Angeles. Yeah. So right now we're focused on Los Angeles. We're piloting this, seeing if this is something that we want to continue and see what really grows from it to see if this is a viable program.
Then we would expand it to the other 3 counties. That's the goal.
And as I think it was requested that we present a list of current members, so please make sure to get this on your way out and you can see who's involved. You can also let us know if you know of anyone that also would like to be involved. Of course, we don't want to make this task force too large where we can't get anything done, but these, you all are invited to attend the meetings if you want to attend and provide input there as well.
And part of the outcomes would also address the question down there about if we get a call and we don't handle that complaint, it would be easier for us to refer. People would know who to refer that complaint to versus, we don't handle that, click, goodbye. We want to continue the customer service beyond that arena, so that would be part of one of the outcomes also. Thank you, Alicia.
And so that's just a brief overview and update on EJCP, on Environmental Justice Community Partnership. Our next meeting is on December 4th. Please see me if you are interested in presenting. We didn't have a presenter this week. So if you are interested in presenting to the advisory council on your program and your project, we're more than willing to hear from you as well. And also on any topics that you want to hear. So Victor Yip's presentation came out of another advisory council member who wanted information on the complaint process. So if there's a gap or something that you want to hear about, please let us know so we can invite staff with time to present to the advisory council. Any questions or comments? Well, thank you all for being here.
We're not done.
Oh, sorry. That's right.
It's not on the agenda, but we've got time. It's just now 1:14. Let's go around the table and do introductions and kind of like a round table. Tell a little bit of something about what you're doing, anything that you want the council to know about. Start with Dr. We haven't seen you in a while. Welcome
It's been
back.
a while. Thank you for
Yes.
I missed you also. It's
Missed
wonderful
you.
to be back. So my name is Todd. Heibel is my last name, Todd, at San Bernardino Valley College, and so I was delighted to see the Ranger program at one of our local elementary schools. So yay, thank you for that. I'm also grateful for some of the AB 617 work, the steering committee and the public forum that we've had in the San Bernardino Musquoy area. So that's been really important to have that community involvement. And last thing I'll say, and I'll hand over the mic, is AQMD has been wonderful. So we are in a current partnership with AQMD with air quality monitors on our campus in selected locations. So we're currently working with our students, and so it's again a variety of students. So it's I was really happy to hear about the job descriptions and saying, hey, if they've got some background in science. So we've got some of our environmental science students, our geographic or information systems or GIS students working with those data, air quality data. And beginning to create some projects and products. So, and it's nice for our community college level students to be involved in that first order research in the field. I think that's really important. It's kind of neat to see what we're doing in the Coachella Valley, for example, too, with that sort of grassroots citizen science, those types of activities. So I'm hoping in December we can report some additional information. So thank you.
Good, I see some collaboration here though and some outreach for some of those jobs.
Yes.
And also, thank you, the college has been host to a lot of our community steering committee meetings, so there's just involvement and connectivity all the way around here, so we appreciate you. Denise Gailey, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm a newer addition to the South Coast family, but I'm about 8 months in. I work on state and federal legislation, also work with small business assistants, and with Alicia and Fabian on the environmental justice program. So.
Hey, Jessica.
Hello everyone, my name is Jessica Tovar. I work with the Moving Forward Network based at the Urban and Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College. Take I wanted to let you all know that I'm actually going to be going part-time with my work. So I'm not going to be the director of the Moving Forward Network starting on Monday. I'm going to be just working part-time as coordinator. But I did want to mention that we're working on an automation study for freight. A lot of our communities across the country are really interested about how freight automation may impact either positively or negatively their communities. So along with a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, MFN, RAMP, which is the Regional Asthma Management and Prevention, and HIP, Human Impact Partners, are doing this study that should be out within the next 18 months. That has the current state of freight automation, some of the concerns and the promises for it, and then some policy recommendations on how to move forward with that.
Exciting, yeah.
So, hi everyone, my name is Oscar Rodriguez. I live in the city of Huntington Beach, and I'm with Mi Comunidad. So it's just my friend Victor and I, who we were successful in with helping this Ocean View School District litigate the Rainbow Environmental Services. It's a transfer facility in Huntington Beach, and I'm proud to report since the last time we've met, the new gym is now open. It's a $4 million gym that we were able to win through the litigation with Rainbow Environmental Services.
Alicia and I were able to.
Oh, you guys were
visit
there?
the
You
gym.
guys were there? Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful gym, brand new, state-of-the-art facility for the community. So we'll be able to use that. Has all the filtration systems it needs just in case that there's a hiccup with their equipment. That the students can go inside the gym and play and have fun. Right now we're working on a project with desalination. So looking at the negative and even positive, trying to be neutral, impacts of desalination in Huntington Beach. There's a plant that they want to build. It's about $1.3 billion. Very expensive. Desalination is the most expensive way to get seawater to fresh water. So we're looking at that. We're trying to learn more. We actually have a tour of the Carlsbad plant coming up. So trying to learn more about it and maybe how it negatively affects our air as well. Just because it's more expensive just because it requires a lot of energy, and where are we getting that energy from? Coal plants, and there's a lot of things we're looking at there too. So. I'll have some updates.
Sure, Jessica.
I just wanted to mention that Paula is on, so if we could also.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Paola.
Can you hear us?
She called them
Is she up?
the line to only listen.
Oh, to listen
Oh,
only. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
I don't know,
gosh,
she was
okay.
just telling me she's on, I was like, we should acknowledge her.
Oh,
Thank you,
yes.
Paula.
Yes. Tell her to text you if she has any questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I emailed her. Let's see.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Jessica. All right.
So I'm Julia Jordan with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And I actually am here for a couple of days, but I work out of the Sacramento office. So I'm a policy coordinator there, and I do state policy work, sort of related to our work here in Eastern Coachella Valley and also in Fresno and the San Joaquin Valley. And I work a lot on some of the climate and land use, transportation, sustainable agriculture, sort of a variety of things related to our environmental justice, air quality, water quality work. So I think Rebecca's the one that's normally here, and she might be listening on the phone, but because I was in town, I wanted to make sure to come see some faces and connect since I don't get to be here very often. So thanks for having me.
Welcome, we're
Thank
glad to have you. Miss you, Rebecca, but glad to have you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hart with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance in LA. Some of the big things we're working on are SoCal Gas. SoCal Gas, you might know, has been reaching out to cities and neighborhood councils and counties across the state, asking for people to endorse what they refer to as a balanced approach to energy. They're really emphasizing choice, and I think wanting for people to be anxious about the possibility of electric stoves and that sort of thing. We are seeing that the state, you might have heard that the city of Berkeley banned natural gas going forward in new buildings, and we think Berkeley is ahead of its time as usual, and that everybody is needing to follow, and a lot of cities, including LA, are ramping up to follow suit. Of course, this presents SoCal Gas with a bit of a dilemma. Anyway, so we're really looking forward to push on decarbonization and electrification, and right now we are sort of playing whack-a-mole because they are presenting at neighborhood councils all over the city, and we're trying to get out ahead of them, and we're not, it's a lot. So that's been a big focus, a lot of education about biomass and clean energy and decarbonization, so a lot on that. We're also working on developing aspirational guidelines for developers so that when neighborhood councils talk with developers, they can have informed and ideally influential conversations about how best to build buildings that will be carbon neutral. Congress of Neighborhoods is an annual event. It's coming up the 28th of this month. It's open to everybody, so if you're around and interested, come on by, they'll feed you, and it's actually often I actually find it a really interesting meeting. It's about 800 people throughout the neighborhood council system, and we'll be presenting on how neighborhood councils can operationalize Garcetti's Green New Deal at the neighborhood council level. So that's something I'm very excited about and that I think we'll be working on going forward. There's a new tree czar, I'm using that term because I forget the actual term, in the city of LA, which we're really excited about because our trees have been overlooked and undervalued for far too long in LA, and there's now a growing awareness that we really cannot afford to do that, and they're a huge part of our air. So we really need to help our trees and get more of them and keep the ones we have. And we are still locally working on hoping to encourage better practices around diesel idling as well.
Okay, Lisa, what's the date? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, what is the diesel line?
Idling, sorry. The diesel truck idling is a big issue. And I don't know that much about it. I'm connected to the Watts Clean Air and Energy Committee, which is starting to work on this, but there is a state bill trying to improve it. I think what my understanding is there are laws, just like there are for cars, for smog, and idling is a problem with diesel because they tend to idle a lot and have reasons to need to idle a lot, but they don't have, we have smog checks. We car drivers have smog checks, and diesel trucks do not have smog checks. So I think if I remember correctly, the purpose of this bill would be to do that. But then there are other efforts, including electrification of our trucks, instead of diesel trucks, having electric trucks. So folks are working on that as well.
Okay. Lisa, what's the date of the Congress of Neighborhoods and where? Do you know?
It's the 28th of September on a Saturday, and it's at City Hall.
Okay.
And if we get our acts together, which might or might not happen, we'll hold a reception afterwards, which you would all be welcome to attend.
Jim?
On the idling trucks,
Thank you.
Yes.
there is a statewide regulation that trucks can only idle for a certain amount of time.
Yes.
Our inspectors actually can go out and enforce that regulation.
Okay.
So if you use the complaint line or
Okay.
contact Victor or any of the folks here,
Mhm.
let us know. And it's really helpful if we know that, as Victor said, when does this happen? So that we can send out our team and give them starting to issue tickets for truck idling in neighborhoods. And so that's something that we can try and help out a little bit with.
Okay, thank you. And I'm still learning a lot about this, but if I understand correctly, one of the problems with diesel idling is that it's not good for diesel engines to be turned off and turned back on, and it's actually maybe more polluting. But that there's a lot of development and lots happening right now, and there are people, diesel truck drivers hanging out for maybe like half an hour at a time, just sitting there idling. And that's probably over the time. Okay, all right. So I'll pass that along. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Thank you, Jill. Great information. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. All right.
Well, hi everybody. My name is Jin. I work on the Clean Vehicle Rebate Project. As you may know, it's the state rebate project for electric vehicles. Valerie Gonzalez I think is on this committee, but now she's moved on to a different project.
Oh, okay.
SOMA, the solar on multi-housing.
Okay.
So I hope I can take her place. Yay! That's a yes then. That looks like a yes.
I'll
Yeah.
work with Alicia at the end of the meeting.
Yeah. And basically what we do is we do outreach and education on behalf of the CARB project. And we have a specialist in LA that does all the outreach for LA County and Orange County. And I do outreach in San Bernardino and Riverside County. And my team especially focuses on the disadvantaged communities.
Okay.
So Cali Enviro Screen, top 25% is where we tend to go. Now, we do booth, like go to vendor or go to different health fairs, resource fairs on the weekends. But we also have presentations. We would like to go to work with small community-based organizations, anybody that has workshops like neighborhood council meetings, and just present to the small communities about different rebates for electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and we also obviously, since we're in South Coast, we talk about replace your ride as well.
Mhm.
So then, since they're all stackable with each other, Edison has 1,000. Replace your ride is maximum is $9,500, and state is up to $4,500, and all that stack. So you can get a decent amount of change off when it comes to a purchase or lease of the electric vehicles.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you, Jim.
Oh, of course.
Mhm. Okay.
Alicia James with Lee Andrews Group. We're Environmental Justice Community Partnership Consultants.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sahara Wasano. I work with Alianza Coachella Valley, formerly known as the Building Healthy Communities Coachella. We're a coalition. We work with 11 to 12 different organizations that are locally in the Coachella Valley with the interest of changing the economic conditions of Eastern Coachella Valley residents. We focus on environmental justice issues such as the Salton Sea, as I just mentioned, and I look forward for you all to enjoy the documentary that will be shown at the conference. We've done work around infrastructure as well, housing. One of our biggest wins is redistricting our water district for violating the voters' rights for more than 80 years. And also pavement Polanco parks, which are mobile home parks, units of 12 to 14, to reduce poor air quality in the communities. So that's just a few of the things that we do. We also do work around education equity to reduce suspensions and expulsions, led by the parents. We've been on our 6th year, and now it's being implemented in the middle schools, and now we're going to the high schools. We also have a youth organizing council with youth that lead the work around the Hue Music and Art Festival. So that happens in the month of April. So you missed it this year. But we have the ECB Pride, which is going on its 3rd year, led by the youth once again. That's going to be on October 26th at the city of Coachella. From 12 to 9, we're going to have a dance party from 8 to 9. But all these events are spearheaded by the youth with the intention of providing platforms for them to exercise their leadership and to create a community that is currently not there in existence. So that's just a little bit of what we do as Alianza.
If that's a little bit, when do you sleep? That's a lot. Great, great. No, thank you for your commitment to your community, yes. And welcome to the council.
Ada Briseño with Unite Here Local 11. I just want to say that one of the things that we do is work with developers to make sure that we're protecting workers' rights and making sure that they're hiring people within the area that they live in to make sure that they don't have to travel, 2 hours a day or 4 hours a day to and from work. But I just, as it pertains to this meeting, I just want to say that we're focusing on making sure that we bring not only Unite Here members to the event that we're having, but also we just sent it out to the Democrats in Orange County because we want to make sure that we get Democrats there as well. And so I'm committing to at least 20 people from both my union and the Democratic Party. So hold me accountable. Make sure I do it.
Just make sure they register, everyone registers.
Okay.
But we look forward to seeing it.
What happens if someone just shows up?
They'll have to wait and just to make sure that those that registered are able to get in first.
So we're usually able to accommodate everyone.
That's correct.
We've never had this problem before. We hit our target
Yeah, we'll
before
see.
the conference. We're loving this. We're loving this. So thank you all that participated in sending it out to your networks, and it's been wonderful. And Alicia for doing such a wonderful job. Yes, thank you. And then you're next.
Oh, well, you all heard about the work I'm doing. So I just, hope to see you at the conference. And again, feel free to call me, attend any of your events and so forth, or try to connect you to other staff. That's what I'm here for.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please speak, please. Introduce yourself.
Hi, how are you? How are you? This is Paula from Decision for Social Responsibility.
Hi,
I
Paula.
faced a lot of traffic. I couldn't make it today. I apologize, but I was on the call for the whole thing. So I have a few comments on the conference that I will send to you that PSRMA internally talked about, and I will send them your way, Alicia. I don't know if it's too late, but I will send them to you.
Thank you.
But I just wanted to quickly say what PSRLA is working on right now, and essentially we continue to work on our FPLA push initiative in South Central Los Angeles, focusing specifically on the community selection process and the nomination through AQMD and the CAR process. So pushing for alternatives and ways that are more that are not pitting communities against each other. So with the FPLA push initiative, what we have right now is that we're going to conduct the second round of the Air Quality Academy. And thank you, all of you, AQMD, who were there on our first round. We're going to conduct a second one, and the second round will focus mostly on oil drilling sites in the Jefferson Park area, which we're going to conduct community air monitoring and ground truthing in those locations. So this Air Quality Academy will be on September 27 and September 28. And we're looking to expand or look at how AQMD can get involved in this process and see if there are any intersectionalities that we can bring up and have. This is really important for, at least for the work that we're doing with PSRLA, to open up opportunities for community residents to ask questions directly to agencies, because oftentimes that's a hard thing to do. So we want to see if the Air Quality Academy is a space to do that. And so that's one of the biggest things that we're working on right now. In addition to that, we are doing continuing the work with the Stand LA, which, by the way, today they have a grassroots lobby day at City Hall in response to the report that the City of LA released regarding oil and gas. So that's another big bucket of work for PSILA in regards to air quality. And I think that's it. And I just, again, wanted to thank you for being part of our events and for being there when we needed you. So I really appreciate that, and I look forward for other opportunities to work together and seeing how we can truly make this process of AB 617 a process that is not going to put communities against each other, and it's not going to leave communities behind.
Great, thank you, Paolo, we appreciate that. Is that everyone? Was there anyone? Rebecca, are you on the phone? Okay, well, with that, if there's no other questions or comments, our next meeting again is December the 4th. If you're not able to make it, know that now, please let us know so that if there's not enough, we can make other arrangements, because I know that's getting into the holidays. Other than that, motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Second. I have to ask all in favor. So done. Alrighty, thank you all again for coming, really appreciate it.
Can you send